Hey there, all you friends, true believers, and newcomers alike, and welcome to another Superfly Comics Guy Omnibus video. If it seems like it's been a while since you've seen me, that's because it has. I was sick for the past couple weeks. It hurt to speak. I really wasn't in any condition to be going on a nerdy ramble about comic books, but that all changes today because I am better now and here to talk about the Ultimate Spider-Man Omnibus Volume 4. We'll be going over the cover, the spine, the contents collected, the build quality, and a flip through where I can share my thoughts, opinions, and recommendations on the book. So if you enjoy the video at any point, you know how to show it, and feel free to chuck your own thoughts down in the comments. This marks an interesting period in Ultimate Spider-Man because it's where the series artist changes for the first time. So let's find out if it still holds up to the rest of the series. Okay, so we have the dust jacket to the Ultimate Spider-Man Omnibus Volume 4 in front of us. This is the standard edition cover by Stuart Immonen, who became the series' primary artist after Mark Bagley left. There is also a direct market cover, again by Stuart Immonen, featuring the X-Men, but I personally preferred this one. I don't know, a lot of the covers to these omnibuses have been kind of symbiote related, and I don't know, this one kind of went along with that theme, and, well, it kind of reminds me of the Ultimate Spider-Man PS2 video game, but I'm getting ahead of myself. There is the spine, pretty similar design to the other books, and the back. So you have your Marvel cover gallery here. You have a cover price of $125 US, $156.25 Canadian. And we're collecting here Ultimate Spider-Man 112 to 133 and Annual number 3. We're collecting Ultimatum Spider-Man Requiem 1 and 2. And we're collecting the Ultimate Spider-Man 2009 relaunch 1 through 15. So that's where the series was renumbered. It started again with a new number 1, but it's pretty much the same continuity. So let's take a look under the dust jacket here. There it is. We have a wraparound cover actually by David Lafuente, who is the third primary artist to work on the series. So he stepped in after Stuart Immonen. This is a sample of some of his artwork, and I don't really like it. I'll just come out and say it. I'm not really a fan of this art style. This is the art that will be found in the relaunch series as well, so we'll talk about it, but I don't know, it just doesn't really mesh with the vibe of the previous issues of Ultimate Spider-Man to me, but we'll get to that. For now, let's start flipping through the book. Okay, so as with my usual reviews, I'm going to avoid major spoilers. I may talk about the premise of some of the plot points here and there, but I really do my best not to spoil primary plot points because, you know, a lot of people watching these reviews, I assume, haven't read these books, so I would hate to spoil something really important in the story. You have a credits page here, which is pretty nice. It's not quite a table of contents, but I think it's good enough for this series because this series flows pretty well. You have an introduction here by Ralph Macchio, not the actor, the editor at the time for the Ultimate Universe. And he's talking a little bit about what it was like starting the Ultimate line, how in this universe it just felt like Spidey was being manipulated all the time. Everybody just wants to use him for their own benefit. But he also goes over some of the differences as well. The Green Goblin, the Venom symbiote, the J. Jonah versus Peter Parker dynamic. But then we just dive right in. It's actually pretty helpful here. You get a synopsis here that catches you up on the events of the previous volumes. So if it's been a while since you've read Volume 3, for instance, this is nice. It'll catch you up. Basically, you know, minor spoilers, I guess, for previous volumes, but just so that you know where we are. Peter has broken up with Kitty Pryde, who he was in a relationship with. He's back together with MJ. The Green Goblin is in custody, but Nick Fury is away. He's absent. We don't really know where he is, but he's not really leading S.H.I.E.L.D. right now. Now, in general, this is an interesting period of Ultimate Spider-Man for me, because I've read all of the original Ultimate Spider-Man run before, but pretty much all of the contents of this omnibus, back in the day, I read digitally for the first time. Because back then I was still trying to read in trade paperback format, but I wasn't able to track down all of the trade paperbacks of this material, so I ended up having to read a good chunk of Ultimate Spider-Man digitally the first time. So it was just kind of, well, those of you familiar with the channel will know that Ultimate Spider-Man is my favorite comic series, so you may not think I have much interesting to offer in this review, but actually, I remember reading this the first time not particularly enjoying a good chunk of this material. So I was curious to revisit this and see whether my opinion would change after reading it in omnibus format. Maybe I didn't like it the first time just because I read it digitally. Or maybe there was another reason. But we'll see. I'd say the book starts off pretty strong, actually. The first big A story you get in here is that the Green Goblin is back again, because of course he is. Nobody ever stays in prison in this universe. And he is pissed off. He's ready to cause all sorts of trouble for Peter Parker. So we get another little goblin saga in here to kick off the book. Bagley is no longer on the book, though. Mark Bagley. Now we have Stuart Immonen on the book. And he brings his own style, as you can see here. It's maybe a little bit jarring at first, just because Bagley's art has been so synonymous with the series up until this point. But I think Immonen settles in pretty quickly and finds his stride. And you get used to it. Is it as good as Bagley's art? In my opinion, no. But I still think it works fine. There's plenty of B stories you get in here, such as there's a new mutant that blossoms in Peter's school, and that draws the attention of the X-Men, but also Magneto. And yeah, well, the series is a little self-aware. It pokes fun at the ridiculousness of this and how the school has basically become the epicenter of all of these superhero sightings and mutants and villains, and how half the school knows that Spider-Man goes to their school, and half of those people suspect that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. He doesn't really do a great job of hiding his identity, unfortunately. But that ends up putting a lot of pressure on Aunt May because of all of these increased sightings of Spider-Man around her house that people are noticing. So you get to see the ramifications of that. Some other B stories in here. There's some pretty funny ones relating to the school. Like the students are given this assignment early on where they have to partner up and take care of a fake baby. It's a little silly. Is that a real thing? Has anyone ever actually had to do that? Well, thank God I didn't have to. That's for sure. Taking care of a fake baby and parenting it. Ugh, that would be something. But you also get other B stories, like it goes a little bit more into Shocker's backstory. There's an issue in here where, throughout the series, by this point, Spider-Man has mostly just been making fun of Shocker. He's been a joke villain in this. But there's an issue where they go more into his origin, and it ends up being, honestly, a little sad. But what's pretty exciting is, well, for those of you who don't know, there was a PS2, a PlayStation 2 video game in 2005, which Bendis actually helped with. He helped write it. So it's very cool that during this period of Ultimate Spider-Man, they actually work in the plot of the PS2 game into the comics. It's just really cool to see that story retold here with some pretty significant changes, but they bring it into continuity. Generally, it deals with Venom returns, Eddie Brock. He's trapped in the suit, but it's feeding on him, it's preying on him, and he needs a way out of it. Somehow, though, he feels that Spider-Man is the key to unlocking this. He has this inexplicable connection with Spider-Man, and he needs to track him down. Meanwhile, however, Silver Sable and the Wild Pack are trying to capture Eddie, and that causes a whole bunch of problems for him. the Beetle gets involved somehow and he's pulling off all these heists. And eventually you get to see how all this stuff connects together. Overall, I still think that the game did a better job. The story of the video game was better because they had to change some things based on previous issues of this story. But still, it's cool to see this the plot of this PS2 game that I played so much as a kid and that meant so much to me. It's cool to see it brought into continuity here.
Hey you! Is that a rhinoceros horn or you just have to be... See, I'm so scared I can't even finish my lame joke.
You'll also get the Ultimate Spider-Man Annual number 3 collected in here. And that's actually the first point in this book where David LaFuente's art is showcased. And well, we'll talk about that later, but let's just say it's questionable. There's a pretty fun Jessica Jones appearance in there, though, and that's just cool because Bendis is kind of writing his own character into this series. A good chunk of this book, though, is actually Ultimatum. And that was this crazy cataclysmic event that seemingly comes out of nowhere, and Spider-Man just has to save as many people as he possibly can. There's some great character development for J. Jonah Jameson during this portion, which I really, really liked. And what's awesome, too, is that you actually get a few Mark Bagley flashback bits sprinkled in, which it hurts a little bit because it kind of makes you reflect on and think about what could have been, what the series could have been like if Mark Bagley was still drawing it. But it's still cool. And then at the end of, Ultimatum actually marks the end of what I'm going to call Volume 1 of Ultimate Spider-Man. Because after that, there was kind of a relaunch, a renumbering of the series with a little mini-series called Requiem in between. And it was actually interesting reading for me to read it this time because I think when I was reading the series in trade paperback format, I completely missed Requiem the first time I read it, which was very confusing back then because you go straight from Ultimatum, this crazy event, straight into the renumbered Ultimate Spider-Man series. And it didn't make a lot of sense to me back then, so it was nice to have Requiem collected in here to sort of bridge the gap a little bit. And that's one reason I really love omnibuses, because it takes, well, if it's mapped correctly, it takes all of the guesswork out of trying to track down the correct issues and the correct reading order. It's just all presented for you in an easy to read manner. But let's jump ahead actually to that Ultimate Spider-Man relaunch series, because I want to talk about it a little bit. Here you can see that same board design that's on the board of the book. Featuring the new art style, which again, I don't like. I'll get to it though. I'll talk about it. This, so this is a relaunch that happened in 2009. They started with a new number 1, and they started calling it, instead of Ultimate Spider-Man, it was called Ultimate Comics Spider-Man. I guess because they were trying to establish the Ultimate Universe a little bit more. I don't know. There's a 6-month time jump that happens after Ultimatum, which is very, very abrupt because you go from this cataclysmic event, like I mentioned, straight into this, and it's, everything is fixed again. It's still the same characters. Continuity is still the same, but it feels like some stuff has been reset. Peter is working at a fast food chain. Instead of the Daily Bugle, they recontextualize Gwen and her relationship with Peter. The cops and the public are actually huge fans of Spider-Man at this point, which is pretty cool. It changes the dynamic a little bit. He's a little weirded out by everyone being so friendly to him. And there are some pretty cool stories in here, like Aunt May finds a new purpose and starts to foster a bunch of kids at her home. I won't spoil who the kids are, but it reveals a different side of her, and I've always felt that Aunt May was written pretty well in the Ultimate Spider-Man comics. But this is an interesting point in time because the government decides to outlaw mutants completely, which puts a lot of stress on someone like Kitty Pryde, who has been going to Peter's school for a while now. And, you know, the kids start treating her differently. She becomes a bit of an outcast, more than she already was. You get the introduction of Mysterio, who's always fun. There's so many... It opens up the door for so much creativity with Mysterio because his powers are illusion-based, so it feels like the writer and artist can just do whatever they want, and it makes sense. They introduce Rick Jones around this time with an interesting little twist on him. Ultimate Chameleon appears here too. So it's pretty good. The writing in here, I would say, is fine. It's not that special. It starts to get a little repetitive as it goes on. But the elephant in the room, and my biggest problem during this portion of the book, as you might have guessed, is the artwork. It's by far the biggest stylistic change so far, and it just doesn't work for me, even rereading it. Because you compare this to some of Bagley's art, which, you know, you can see from the flashbacks in this book that I mentioned already, and you look at the detail there, you look at the inks, and then you look at this, and it's like, I don't know, where's the detail? Where are the inks? It just doesn't feel like a full package here. And it just feels off. I would say the action scenes, at least, are okay, even though Spidey is drawn with quite a massive head, hands, and feet. But it's the out-of-costume moments that were the worst part for me, because a lot of the character designs have completely changed, with Peter looking particularly awful during this time, and same with MJ. They change MJ's design quite a bit, and I just couldn't get into it. Yeah, I don't know, it just wasn't for me. To be completely fair, the art does improve a little bit by the last few issues of this book. There are some cool panels that are drawn, and they end up changing Spider-Man's design a little bit so his head isn't so damn round all the time. Maybe it could be that maybe the fans back then also didn't like the style, so maybe editorial pushed for a change. Who knows? Maybe I'm speculating too much. I don't know. I could see this style working in something like a manga, for instance, but for this particular series at this particular time, I just don't think that David Lafuente was the right choice for this. Moving on to the extras section, we have some pretty classic extras in here, such as variant covers, which are always nice to see, and character sketches and location designs. Some other designs here, some inks. So that's pretty cool. That's pretty typical for the extra section of an omnibus. You have some character designs by David Lafuente as well. But if we jump ahead a little bit, you actually get some interviews as well. Don't want to flip through all of the designs for fear of spoilers, but you get this Ultimate Immonen interview, and it's pretty straightforward. It goes over Immonen's style and his mindset following up Bagley, but it's a pretty standard interview. Nothing really jumped out at me. What was more interesting, and what I recommend you guys actually check out if you're flipping through this extra section, is this Brian Michael Bendis interview, which is much more in-depth. It's much longer. It covers a lot of topics, like they go over Stan Lee's work, Bendis' thoughts on that, how they were trying to handle the launch of Ultimate Spider-Man back in the early 2000s. Because apparently a previous writer had kind of attempted it, but it ended up being sort of like a verbatim retelling of Amazing Fantasy 15. And, you know, it talks about how Bendis took a slightly different approach. It talks about how Bendis views the spider bite as a metaphor for puberty, how Aunt May, he based a lot of Aunt May around how his actual mom is. They talk about Steve Ditko versus John Romita Sr. and where inspiration came from them. They talk about the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie. They really cover a whole host of topics, so I definitely recommend checking out that Bendis interview if you're flipping through the extra section. For build quality in this omnibus, we have 1,032 pages. There's the eye. It's okay. It really could be better. It doesn't open up that wide. This book is printed at the Donnelly printer in China. And the gutter loss isn't really too bad here in the middle of the book. But in other areas of the book, it can get pretty annoying, especially with the way that Bendis likes to panel his pages, because a lot of the time he'll have panels that sort of go horizontally across the pages, and you have to read them horizontally, top to bottom, across both pages. And when you have a book that the gutter loss is kind of like the binding isn't great, it can really kind of affect the reading experience. I found myself pretty annoyed by that pretty frequently. The pages themselves, they're fine. They're not terribly thin. There is some bleed through that I noticed, but not enough to really bother me. It's sort of comparable to that first volume of Ultimate Spider-Man that I reviewed back in the day, because there was some bleed through in that one, but not terrible. Yeah, so here's an example of a spread page, and yeah, it's not too bad on this page, but you are losing some artwork to the gutter. Okay, so to wrap up here with some closing thoughts, how to summarize this. Yes, it's true, Ultimate Spider-Man is my favorite comic series. It holds a very special place in my heart because it was essentially how I got into comics, and it's what started this channel as well. But I would argue that this is the weakest portion of that original run. The first portion of this omnibus is honestly fine. It's pretty good even, and Stuart Immonen does a good job of capturing that high school feeling in his artwork that's so prevalent in this entire series. But by the time you get to the relaunch series, it takes a significant dip in quality, and I don't know, I didn't really enjoy it as much. I still think this volume is worth checking out at least once, just to see the whole story through. But in my opinion, this is a pretty low point, so your enjoyment will depend heavily on how much you liked the previous volumes. But that's been my review of the Ultimate Spider-Man Omnibus Volume 4. I hope you enjoyed. You let me know what you thought about the book, the review. If you've read it before, what did you think about the change in style? Or if you have any questions, you can throw them down below. But I want to thank you so much for joining me today. I hope to catch you in another video real soon, so you have yourself a great day. I've been Superfly Comics Guy, and until next time, keep reading. Bye-bye, guys.